My name is Mike Bailey. I grew up, well, in several places, but I usually tell people I'm from Ohio. That's where probably most identify with because I went to high school there. And then I went to school at Purdue University. Well, I had intended to be a mechanical engineer, but it turned out that at Purdue, computer graphics grew up in mechanical engineering. Professor Dick Garrett, Professor Dave Anderson. Dave Anderson ended up being my major advisor in grad school. But my senior year, I had some tech electives to burn off. And oh, look, a computer graphics class. I wonder what that's about. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. It just seemed to me like, why is this not a required course for engineers? We spent all of our life trying to learn to manipulate numbers, and finally somebody is letting me look at the numbers. So this seems so obvious, and I felt so insignificant. I had to go to grad school to try and learn more. And then that led to the PhD program. And yeah, coming out of the PhD program, I went to work at Sandia Labs in Albuquerque. They were doing some really interesting mechanical design things, and they desperately needed to be able to visualize it. And so, okay, here we go. Mechanical engineering background combined with graphics, and that was great. I ended up coming back to Purdue as a faculty member when they got a large grant from Control Data Corporation. And it was through that I met Dick Mueller with Control Data Corporation, and he had been named chair of the SIGGRAPH 84 conference. And he said, hey, would you like to work with me on that conference? And I had been to several SIGGRAPHs. In fact, as a grad student, I went to SIGGRAPH 75 in Bowling Green because Purdue is not that far a drive from Bowling Green. And oh, what the heck, a great way to spend the week. And again, just fell in love with the whole thing. And so I had been to several SIGGRAPHs, and the idea of contributing to the conference was just beyond my wildest dreams. But then Dick Mueller said, yeah, come on, you can do it. So I got suckered in that way. So I was courses chair in 84, and then that just sort of started a whole cascade, a whole bunch of SIGGRAPH dominoes falling. I went to work at Megatech Corporation, which is a name nobody knows anymore. They were acquired by DEC. Who was acquired by Compaq, who was acquired by Hewlett Packard, who decided to get out of the graphics world, at least at that moment. By that time, I had gone to the San Diego Supercomputer Center on the campus of the University of California, San Diego. Megatech was in San Diego, so this was really natural. And boy, that was great. I was the director of visualization there. And my God, we had graphics equipment and a supercomputer.
Wow.
Like, oh my gosh, what could be better? And then I got this opportunity to come up here to Oregon State University on the faculty. And that just seemed too cool to pass up. And so really that's what I want to do with the rest of my career is give other people those same ridiculously serendipitous opportunities that I had. I believe it's my job, my duty, honor bound to make sure other kids have those same serendipitous opportunities. And so I kind of throw myself into teaching the classes here, and I teach intro to computer graphics, and I teach graphics shaders, and I teach GPU programming, and I teach scientific visualization and some other things. But yeah, I want them to have the full experience as well, and I'll do everything I can to get that to happen.
You've done like the introduction to computer graphics at SIGGRAPH for like what, 30 years or something crazy like that?
On and off for probably that long. Yeah, I submitted it this year too. I look back and I say, if not for this, I would be doing something much less fulfilling, much less exciting. And the desire to help other people get to that same place doesn't stop at the college classroom. It extends to SIGGRAPH as well. And I had looked at the whole course thing, and I love the courses. That's my favorite venue because I want to learn new stuff. But I'd looked at that and I'd said, boy, if you didn't know graphics, if you just showed up sort of like I did at Bowling Green. You would feel so out of place. And I thought, oh, well, I can fix that. I know how to fix that, or I sort of know how to fix that. So, yes, I've been doing that a lot. And also, I was conference courses chair 5 times. One, people kept asking, and two, nobody else seemed to want to do it because it is a lot of work. At that time, we didn't do course proposals. The courses chair went to their friends and said, hey, would you like to teach a course? And so I said, I am not nearly smart enough to come up with all the course topics that should be there. And so I started the proposal system and I started evaluations. We didn't do class evaluations at the end of the courses. When I was on the executive committee, I started getting the course notes turned into CDs. That's the only way to do that at the time. There was no PDF. The only way to do that was to scan them into bitmaps. So it was better than having a ton of paper on your shelf, but it wasn't anywhere near what it is now. But again, it was the same idea. I want other people to have the opportunities to learn and to get into the field. And I could do that from being courses chair. Well, of course, the big thing is that it was in Las Vegas. And SIGGRAPH wanted to run this experiment. Las Vegas, it's not that far from Los Angeles. It's freeway the whole way. And so, yeah, maybe people would come. It's an interesting town in that there's lots of other things to do because so many things are subsidized by the casinos. You can find cheap hotels. You can stuff yourself to death at a buffet for $8. And this wasn't really my decision. This has been decided long before they picked chairs. In those days, SIGGRAPH planned like 5 years out. I was living in San Diego at the time. They asked if I wanted to do it. And I first said, oh my God, no. The easiest way to get somebody disqualified to be conference chair is for them to say immediately, yes, I'll do it. That proves either there's an ulterior motive or they don't understand it. What you want is somebody who says absolutely not and then changes their mind. And they picked a co-chair, Carol Byram, who is great. In those days, there were co-chairs, which cuts both ways. There was good things because it spread the work, bad things because people get on each other's nerves. Carol and I think, ended up being the only co-chairs who were still speaking to each other after the conference. This was one of the best partner experiences of my life. Carol was working for Sony at the time doing marketing communications. She had absolutely no interest in the technical, but all the stuff around the infrastructure and running the conference and the marketing and all of that. And I'm technical, and so I had absolutely no interest in the marketing and communications of the conference, but I loved getting involved in the papers and the panels and the courses and all of that. And so it was just this perfect division of labor. We still talk. She was living in Vancouver last time SIGGRAPH was in Vancouver, so we had lunch together.
When did the co-chair era end? Do you know?
That's a great question. Maxine Brown in 92 ended up being a single chair, but that's because her co-chair resigned. It was at least through 94. Because I know we had 2 co-chairs in 94, but then one of them stepped down. And so Dino Schweitzer ended up doing it by himself. But I ended up being courses chair for him.
Okay, so after you chaired an entire conference, you went back to being courses chair.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be panels chair because I wanted to try something different that I didn't know much about. And Dino came to me and he said, we have a ton of people who all want to be panels chair and nobody who wants to be courses chair. That was my 5th time.
Who was the keynote?
Oh, Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems. At the time, Sun was a major player in graphics workstations. And he made a video. He made a really cute video. I wish I hadn't lost it. It may not play anymore anyway. There were 2 things I really remember fondly and proudly from the 91 conference. I tapped Steve Cunningham and said, would you be the conference education chair? And this is not something that had happened up until that point. And I'm going to give you a piece of the budget. It probably did happen up to that point where somebody said, do this, but you don't get any money. And I said, no, I'm the co-chair I'm going to take a piece of the budget and put it at this education program. Do a good job. And of course, Steve Cunningham is exactly the right person to ask for that. So it really kind of set a trend that education had a place at the conference. It was 91 and it worked because we were going to wall off some budget. It was a tough budget year because there was a recession in 91. We were involved in a war in the Middle East. And it turned out the attendance in Las Vegas was not as overwhelming as we were hoping it was. It was good, but not like a suburb of LA. The second thing is I wanted to, and again, Carol said, okay, we wanted to do something in this nascent area called virtual reality. We put together this VR kind of exhibition. Today, we would call it emerging technologies, but I don't think that term existed yet. But
was that during the Jaron Lanier era?
Mhm. And several others. I remember Henry Fuchs brought out a very cool experimental VR system that they had at North Carolina.
Carolina.
My parents, of course, had to come out and see this thing I had been telling them I was supposedly in charge of. They had a ball at it. Henry would say, "Hey, would you try this for us?" And my dad just about hopped over the railing to get a shot at it. But it was a whole bunch of VR, really at that time, researchers. There weren't a whole lot of in the way of products, but we got them all into kind of a space on the exhibit floor so that people could really come try it out, because at that time VR was a tremendous buzzword and probably 3 people in the whole world had tried it. And so the whole rest of us were talking about it as if we knew something, but we didn't. The goal was to let people actually try it so that when we all either praised it or criticized it, we knew what we were talking about. I was real happy with how that turned out. And I was real happy with how the education program turned out. The presence in Las Vegas cut both ways. The university people loved it because the grad students could stuff themselves silly for like $8 at the Circus buffet. The hotels, you could find really cheap hotels because they were subsidized by the casinos. But the casinos run the hotel. And so we also had several attendees who couldn't get into their rooms because the previous occupant of the room hadn't left yet, and the hotel wasn't going to track them down because, well, they probably are gambling. We should leave them alone. And so we weren't used to the idea that our attendees came second. So that left a bad taste, somewhat in my mouth, but in many other people's mouths too, is we weren't used to the idea that this 20-some thousand person conference was being treated like a second-class citizen. We held one of the receptions at a water park at 110 degrees during the day and about 95 at night, and that's the perfect time to be at a water park reception. As the math nerds, we knew not to gamble. So I think the attendance was like 27,100, but that's not big in Las Vegas. That's not NAB size or the iron workers or the plumbers. And to top it all off, this wasn't a big gambling crowd. We did not get the treatment we were used to in other cities. Still, people went out, they saw shows, they ate lots. And so there, yeah, like I said, the city of Las Vegas cut both ways. In those days, they always took the cover of the proceedings and framed it for the co-chairs. I do have that. And remember, we used to print that advanced program too before it went digital. And I have that framed at home as well. I'm sure I've got some of the cloisonne pins. I know I've got t-shirts. That was the year Andy Van Dam won the Coons Award. The Coons Award was odd numbered years. I have this vision of his family trying to get into that session and not having badges. And so I remember me as having to intervene, like, please let them in. The student volunteers are really good. They're very dedicated and they take their job seriously. Nope, sorry, no badge, no enter. It's okay.
What about the electronic theater?
I remember sitting there with my parents. They had heard me talk about SIGGRAPH for years. And finally, oh, you're in charge of what? Everything, Mom. They came to the conference. And I remember sitting with them at the Electronic Theater and watching their jaws drop. Why didn't you tell us about this? I did, Mom. That was sort of more on Carol's side, was running the that part of it. But the first piece was from Terminator 2. You know, they always try and lead with a whiz bang, something that'll just blow your socks off. And they chose the piece from Terminator 2, the metal guy. I loved the movie. And I just, oh, good choice, guys. Because I hadn't thought about, I wasn't in charge of that part. And so I actually did not know what had been accepted and what order it was going to be in. So that was just a really pleasant surprise, like, oh, okay, my adrenaline's up for the next 2 hours. The other thing I remember, though, about that show, you remember the red and green paddles? That was Lauren Carpenter who came up with that idea. And Rachel Carpenter, his wife, helped make the paddles. They were paint stirrers with reflector tape on each side. They had this funny mass production thing to get them made. And then he modified programs. He modified a Pong program. So the left half of the audience was playing against the right half. You turn your stick to get your paddle to move up and down. Then he also had modified the Silicon Graphics flight simulator so that the whole audience was flying the plane, really.
What we want you to do is a little practice exercise. Everybody who's inside that white rectangle, do green. Everybody else do red or nothing. Green if you're inside there. And if you see your neighbors making a mistake, please tell them so. Put it on the side that's red. Okay. Now you guys.
We have a Pong game here. But the folks on the left control the left paddle. Those on the right control the right paddle.
Let's go!
Give a round of applause for the person that turned these sticks into wands, and that's the wand woman, Rachel Carpenter.
With the help of a lot of student volunteers.
Okay, you guys on the left, you're controlling roll. On the right, pitch. Let's make another pass. Oh, you're going to turn right. Okay.
Go, 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 go.
We're going to do the countdown for the show. I see a sort of 5 emerging from the murk up there.
Do it now. There's a 5. Green 5, see it?
There's a 5.
Okay.
It's 5 seconds when we start.
Okay. 4.
Go.
3.
Go.
2.
Go.
1.
Go. Welcome to the Electronic Theater. Please take off your glasses.
Thing I learned from that is a mass of people can surprisingly play Pong really well. However, there is a reason we don't get committees of people to fly airplanes. That did not turn out so well. But the whole thing was hilarious. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of set the groundwork for what was going to reemerge in 2006 as the Etch-a-Sketch.
Right. I'm not sure I have any of our paint stick red greens around, but I do have some of the ones from 2006 around. They were more foam rubbery. The other thing I remember a lot from that year was really, really enjoying the committee. Carol and I had been very deliberate, sometimes passing over people who maybe were better at what they do, and instead picking people that we thought were good at what they did, but easy to work with and very cooperative. And so it was a very collaborative committee. It's sort of like the meetings ran themselves. every so often Carol and I would just kind of poke the meeting along, but people just interacted and they went off and they solved problems. And, it just really was a delightful year to get to be a conference chair.